The secrets of World War II are still shocking the world almost 80 years later, including a pigeon in a chimney, a hidden message in an Irish forest fire, and an amazing Nazi treasure trove. Lost treasure, the diary of a Nazi, could lead to the location of a treasure worth several $billion. Prior to the diary going public recently, it was being kept a secret by a shadow society. The diary itself was written almost 80 years ago by an officer with the Waffen-SS. The officer did not use their real name but wrote under the pseudonym Michaelis. Inside the journal are details about Heinrich Himmler's plan to steal all the riches of Europe. This was a very real plan that historians know all about. It was part of the Nazi agenda to take artifacts, priceless works of art, and riches from European nations. The stolen loot was often kept somewhere secret, like in mine shafts or buried in the middle of nowhere. The Nazis disassembled and stole Russia's Amber Room, which still hasn't been discovered. There are plenty of other works of art and timeless treasures taken by the Nazis that have yet to be found. In Michaelis's mysterious diary, there are 11 sites listed where Nazis concealed their loot, paintings, religious objects, gold, and jewels. One of the locations is an abandoned well underneath Haber Palace in a small Polish village. It's believed the gold mentioned in the journal was stolen from the Reichsbank in Breslau, currently worth many billions of dollars. But why didn't anyone reveal this information earlier? It's because, in the aftermath of the war, the officer's diary fell into the possession of a Masonic lodge. This Masonic lodge, located in the small German town of Klinberg, has been in operation for over 1,000 years. During World War II, many of their members were Nazi officers. Yes, there is a direct relationship between German Freemasons and the Nazis. This is a historic fact, not a conspiracy theory. However, these days, members of the Masonic Lodge are not as cruel as the men who came before them. In 2019, the lodge willingly gave the diary to a Polish foundation. In fact, it was given as an apology for what happened during World War II. It's a little late, but better late than never. Now comes the big task. Experts need to find the buried gold underneath Haber Palace. Plus, there are 10 other locations that could yield even more treasure. The hidden message. A wildfire ravaging the Irish coast in 2018 revealed something that had been lost since the days of World War II. Irish police officers were flying above Bray Head to assess the destruction left by the fire when they saw a message carved into the ground. The message was very simple. Partially eroded on the ground but still legible through the smoke and smoldering coastline was the word IRE. In the Gaelic language, IRE means Ireland. During World War II, Ireland was considered neutral territory. Long before Great Britain declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939, Ireland stated that they would not join the fight. It was part of the Irish plan of maintaining their independence from Britain. Over 80 enormous signs reading IRE were carved along the picturesque coastlines of Ireland. They were put there so that pilots flying overhead would read them and know they were moving over neutral territory. It was a way to protect Ireland from accidentally being bombed by the Germans. Before you start getting any negative ideas about Ireland during World War II, they did indeed take part in the fighting. They did not declare war against Germany in 1939 like Britain did, but 43,000 Irish fighters joined the British forces. Ireland also secretly offered support to the Allied powers. They supplied information about ships moving off their coasts and had radar stations designed to pick up submarines. Ireland also allowed the British to patrol their waters and engage with enemy submarines. Although the Irish wrote massive warning signs along the coastlines and were considered neutral territory, their island was still bombed. Northern Ireland was bombed as it was, and still is, technically part of Great Britain and was actively at war with Germany. In April and May of 1941, Belfast was bombed back into the Stone Age. Over 1,000 people were killed by the German Luftwaffe in what's known today as the Belfast Blitz. Ruins in the jungle. In the Argentinian jungle, the ruins of what might just be a decaying Nazi hideout were discovered. According to archaeologists with the University of Buenos Aires, the crumbling buildings in the forest may have been used as a shelter for defeated Nazi leaders. 3 buildings were found not far from the border of Paraguay in the Tayacuare Park. At first glance, the buildings didn't seem that important. They looked like any jungle ruin from the mid-20th century, maybe a failed settlement or something like that. But upon closer inspection, university students found some German coins, 5 to be exact, all of them minted between 1938 and 1941. The students also discovered a porcelain plate with an inscription reading "Made in Germany." All signs point to the buildings being part of a secret jungle base. This place really is in the middle of the jungle. The Nazis who hid here must have been seriously desperate, living in the sweltering heat and humidity, certainly lacking decent food, and without running water. It was a big change from being a big shot in the German military. Although it isn't confirmed that Nazi leaders lived here, it is highly likely. The Nazis were already building bases in the Argentinian jungle before the war came to an end. According to team leader Daniel Shavelson from the university, a secret project was established by the Nazis roughly halfway through World War II. Small groups of builders were sent to remote places in Argentina, deserts, mountains, jungles, and remote cliffs, to construct what you might call bases in the event of a Nazi defeat. Well, we all know how the war turned out, don't we? The Nazis were most definitely defeated, but their hideouts turned out to be unnecessary. Thousands of Italian fascists and German Nazis arrived in Argentina and were greeted with open arms. Croatian fascists also arrived, basically, anyone who was part of the German death machine. They arrived with the blessing of Argentinian President Juan Perón, a true Nazi sympathizer. But these horrendous men of madness and despair could not be protected by the sympathetic president forever. In 1960, one of the key organizers of the Holocaust was captured in Buenos Aires. Adolf Eichmann was caught by a covert Israeli commando team. He was quietly kidnapped and taken to Israel, where he was put on trial and subsequently executed. Other Nazis who escaped to Argentina included Edward Roschmann, Walter Kuchmann, and the worst of them all, Joseph Mengele. It's unclear who exactly may have used this jungle base. Some have suggested it could have been Hitler himself, the one man who definitely would have needed to live in secret if he wanted to survive. Secret gold coins. Metal detecting is on a whole other level in Europe. There is so much history that waving a metal detector around in a random field could unearth artifacts from the beginning of human civilization. In 2015, one man in Germany found something a little more recent. The metal detectorist uncovered a stash of gold coins from between 1831 and 1910. Yes, the coins predate World War II. They weren't minted by Nazi Germany. But they were buried by Nazis. After metal detector enthusiast Florian Boch found 10 gold coins, he alerted archaeologists. Some might consider it a silly thing to do because archaeologists then found 207 more gold coins. If Florian had continued with his excavations alone, he would have had some seriously expensive coins all to himself. Do you think calling an archaeologist was the right thing to do, or would you have kept the coins? The 207 coins were minted in Belgium, France, and Italy. Along with the coins, archaeologists uncovered 2 seals bearing images of a swastika and a German imperial eagle. They also found a stamp for Reichsbank, Berlin, 244. This was a major bank in the city of Berlin. It soon became clear exactly how these coins had come to be buried in the field. Edgar Ring from the Lundberg Museum said the coins were most likely stolen from the central bank during World War II. Then, somebody buried them at the base of a tree in the closing days of the war. they must have been fearful the Soviets or Americans would confiscate their stolen loot. But for whatever reason, they never returned. The tree was later uprooted, and the coins were scattered in the earth. Carrier pigeons. Pigeons were instrumental in World War II, carrier pigeons, to be specific. These brave, garbage-eating rats with wings, as some people call them, were war heroes. One of them was just as mummified inside a man's chimney. Pigeons get a lot of flack in the US, where they're not very respected, but in Britain, people still remember how important carrier pigeons were for transmitting communications during the war. Soldiers working out of Bletchley Park were involved in one of the most secret operations of the war. They decoded the Nazi military's encryptions. Their whole operation relied on using pigeons. They sent vital messages back and forth between outposts, even on D-Day, when soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy. Paratroopers carried homing pigeons because radio silence was essential to a successful operation. If the crew of a bomber airplane got shot down, they would often release a carrier pigeon with a message detailing their whereabouts. Pigeons dodged snipers and even German hawks that had been specially trained to hunt them. The Germans had their own small army of pigeon-killing hawks to interrupt Allied communications. Some of these birds made it through the war, but many of the pigeons died during their valiant service. One of those dead pigeons was just discovered in a man named David Martin's chimney. He was opening the fireplace in his house that had been sealed for the last 30 years when he found the bird. It must have crawled into the top of the chimney to roost, then died and was left preserved within the sealed structure. Even more amazing was what David found when he extracted the pigeon. Tied to one of the bird's bones was a small red capsule. When he unscrewed the capsule, he found a tiny piece of paper with a message on it. It was a message from wartime written in code. David has no idea what it says because he doesn't have the cipher to decode it. But he does suspect the code could have something to do with a conspiracy. This discovery is far more than just birds and their messages. David contacted the British War Museum about the discovery, but they weren't interested in it. He also tried to contact the people at Bletchley Park, which is now a museum. He was hoping to decode the message, but they wouldn't help him either. David has reached out to every British government agency he can think of, but none of them will help him with the message. He suspects they may have decoded it already and don't want the public to learn what the message says. He thinks the message could be something to do with a British bombing raid in France that killed civilians. It could have something to do with a mission involving traitors to the French resistance and a dirty British secret nearly a century old. Medieval propaganda. Human remains from the 10th century were discovered underneath a castle in 1928. The remains were a mystery then and are still a mystery today. They were also used by the Germans as part of a propaganda campaign. It's one of the weirdest stories you've never heard from World War II. The skeleton was found underneath the courtyard of Prague Castle. The mysterious man was buried with a mighty sword and 2 sharp knives. He likely died between 800 and 1000 AD. This was according to the National Museum of Czechoslovakia, the ones behind the original excavation in the 1920s. At the time, Czechoslovakia had only existed as a nation for about 10 years. The lead scientist of the excavation was Ivan Borovsky. He was a Ukrainian who fought for the Russians before he escaped to Czechoslovakia in 1920. He never published anything about the skeleton, nor did he share much about what he found. When the Germans invaded in 1939, they learned of the skeleton and used it as a piece of propaganda. Are you dying to know how a medieval skeleton could possibly be used as propaganda? The Germans accused Ivan Borovsky of covering up the discovery because the skeleton belonged to a German man. Germany started claiming ancient skeletons in Czechoslovakia proved that Germans once ruled Europe. It was part of the Nazi ideology that they had a blood right to take over Europe and indeed, the world. This was only one example of how the Nazis tried to distort science and archaeology. Borowski tried to publish a book about ancient Slavic pottery but was stopped by the Germans. The Nazis said he would be sent to a concentration camp if he denied the Germans false ideas about their ancestry. To put it as simply as possible, the Germans lied about science, and they lied about human history. And they used this random skeleton to do it, all to make themselves look as if they were part of a mighty Aryan race that never existed. The Mi-262. In 2015, an excavation was done at a former airbase in the Netherlands, a base that was occupied by Germans in World War II. Volunteers conducting the dig were shocked when they dug up the remains of a very rare fighter jet. It was found totally by accident, buried inside a bomb crater that had been filled with dirt. The jet was found at Dalen Air Base, not far from Arnhem. The plane is a Messerschmitt Mi-262 jet fighter. It's a rare piece of war history because the Mi-262 was the first operational jet fighter to be used in combat. This particular specimen, buried in a crater created by a fallen bomb, may have been one of the first production models to roll off the line. Historians think it was most likely dumped into the crater by Nazis at the end of World War II as they scrambled to retreat. It's in such good condition that two of its massive 30mm cannons, one wing, and its engine were rapidly pulled from the earth. The nearby museum will be preserving the aircraft and keeping it on display. What do you think are some modern examples of this bizarre German propaganda? Let me know in the comments. And thanks a lot for watching. Remember to hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and come back for more awesome videos soon.